A quiet park, a morning like any other, and a high-ranking military officer entered an area marked "No Entry." But no one expected that. Just because of the plain clothes she was wearing, a prejudiced police officer would turn her military duty into a tense confrontation. When a gun is pointed at someone who shouldn't be targeted, the question is, will justice prevail? And what can people learn from their own arrogance and prejudice? Sometimes the truth is more overwhelming than we can imagine. Follow this meaningful story. If you love this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. The sky was blue, and the sunlight filtered through the ancient trees in the large park in the center of the city. This park is usually a place where people gather to picnic, jog, or relax on weekends. But today, part of the park is fenced off with no entry signs. Tomorrow, there will be a large-scale military exercise here, and high-ranking officers are coming to inspect and make final preparations. Colonel Angela Carter walked through the gates into the park, carrying a compact backpack. As a black woman who had served in the military for more than 20 years, Angela was accustomed to facing challenges and prejudice. Although she was not in uniform today, her confident gait, steady gaze, and strong demeanor exuded unmistakable authority. Angela walked deep into the area marked "No Entry," checking the important locations that had been designated for the rehearsal. As she walked, she checked the notes on her phone, making sure everything was ready for tomorrow. In the distance, police officer George Miller patrolled the park. A white man, Miller had been in the force for over 15 years. However, his arrogance, coupled with racial prejudice, often led him to look down on people who were different from him. Seeing Angela enter the restricted area, Miller immediately felt uncomfortable. He walked quickly towards her, his hand on his belt where his gun was, his face showing obvious discomfort. "Hey, you! Stop!" Miller shouted, his voice echoing throughout the quiet area. Angela stopped, turning her head to look at the voice. Seeing a man in a police uniform approaching, she let out a small sigh. She was used to situations like this, but that didn't make them any less annoying. "Yes, officer?" Angela asked, her voice calm yet sharp. Miller stepped forward, looking her up and down with a searching gaze. "Can't you read? This area is marked "No Trespassing." Leave now before I arrest you for trespassing." Angela raised her eyebrows, keeping her demeanor polite but unyielding. "I know this area is marked, and I have a right to be here. I'm on duty." Miller smiled faintly, his eyes filled with doubt. "Mission? What are you on duty here, janitor? Or are you doing something shady?" Miller's insulting remark made Angela feel the blood rush to her face, but she kept her composure. "I'm Colonel Angela Carter, United States Army. I'm inspecting this area for tomorrow's military exercise. Here are my papers." Angela held out a military ID, but Miller didn't even glance at it. He shook his head, smirking. "You think I'm that easy to fool? An army colonel? Look at you, nothing like a soldier. Do you think I'm stupid?" Angela looked Miller straight in the eye, her gaze cold. "I have no ill will toward you, Officer Miller. But I do ask that you conduct yourself in a manner consistent with the rules. You may verify my information if you wish." Instead of listening, Miller only grew angrier. "You have no right to order me around. This is a public area, and I am the police officer here. You better get out before I put you in jail." Angela crossed her arms and stood straight, showing no intention of giving in. "You can call your commander or the mayor's office. They will confirm my authority here." Miller looked at her with a challenging look. "Oh, I don't need to call anyone? How important do you think you are?" I think you're just a nuisance. Get out now." Angela felt her patience begin to wear thin. She had spent her entire career fighting for this country, overcoming countless prejudices and challenges. And yet here, the one person who was supposed to uphold justice was using his power to insult her simply because of the color of her skin and her gender. "This is my final warning, Officer Miller," Angela said, her voice low but sharp as a knife. "You are overstepping your authority. If you continue, I will report you directly to your superiors." Miller narrowed his eyes, staring at her as if considering her words. But instead of backing down, he became more aggressive. "Okay, you want to play that game? You think you can scare me? Try it," Miller said, stepping closer to Angela in a threatening manner. Angela didn't move. Anger was starting to boil inside her, but her experience and military discipline kept her calm. She knew this situation could escalate quickly if she didn't handle it carefully. "Fine. Go ahead if you want to ruin your career," she said, her eyes unwavering. Angela's confidence made Miller feel even more threatened. He roared, "You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you?" Angela stood still, her gaze steady as the officer grew increasingly uncontrollable. Her calm and confident demeanor only seemed to infuriate Miller. He tightened his grip on his belt, where his gun rested in its holster. "Don't you understand English? I told you to get out!" Miller roared, his voice echoing in the deserted area. Angela didn't respond right away. She understood the situation was escalating and knew she had to handle it tactfully. The wrong words or the wrong actions could send the situation spiraling out of control. "I'm not going anywhere, Officer Miller. I've made it clear that I have a right to be here," she said, her voice calm but firm. "If you don't believe me, you can check with your superiors, but I'm not leaving just because you don't believe me." Miller gritted his teeth, clearly dissatisfied with the answer. He took a step back, his hand still on his belt. "I don't need to verify anything. Who you are doesn't matter. What matters is that you're breaking the law, and I'm going to get you out of here one way or another." Angela sensed that the situation was getting dangerous. Her military instincts told her that this officer might do something stupid. She looked around quickly, noting that the area was deserted and there were no witnesses. If this situation got out of hand, she would have to defend herself. "Listen, Officer Miller," Angela said, her voice lower, carrying a stern edge. "I'm trying to keep things peaceful, but if you continue to behave like this, you will be responsible for the consequences. I suggest you stop right now." Miller smiled faintly, a smile full of sarcasm and contempt. "You think you can scare me? Don't you know who you're talking to? I'm the law enforcement officer here." Then, as if to confirm his words, he pulled the gun from its holster and pointed it straight at Angela. "Okay, you have two choices," he said, his voice cold. "Either you get out of here right now, or I'll arrest you for resisting an officer." Angela did not appear to be panicking, but inside, all her senses were working at full capacity. She knew that any action at this moment could lead to tragedy. She kept her eyes fixed on the policeman, trying to maintain absolute calm. "I won't do anything to threaten you, but I won't follow your illegal orders," she said, her voice firm but not angry. "You're overstepping your authority, and you need to put the gun down immediately." Miller took a step forward, the gun in his hand shaking slightly. Angela knew that he had no control over his emotions, and that was the most dangerous thing in this situation. Realizing that she couldn't diffuse the situation with words, Angela decided to take a different approach. She slowly pulled her phone out of her pocket, deliberately doing so slowly so as not to provoke Miller further. "You can go on if you want," she said, scrolling through her contacts. "But I'm going to call someone in higher authority, maybe your commander or maybe the mayor. See what they have to say about how you handled this situation." Miller hesitated for a moment, his eyes flashing with worry. But instead of backing down, He tried to hide his unease by raising his voice. "What do you think the mayor will do for you? He can't keep you out of trouble," he shouted. Angela ignored Miller's words and dialed the mayor's number. As a colonel in the army, she had direct access to many high-ranking officials, and the mayor was one of them. The call was connected after 2 rings. "Hello, Mayor. This is Colonel Angela Carter," she said, her voice calm. "I need you to come to the park immediately. There is an emergency with a police officer. I will send you the exact location." Miller stood there, not believing what he was hearing. Angela held the line, looking straight at him. "The mayor will be here in a few minutes. I suggest you put your gun down before things get worse." The policeman stood still, his gun still pointed at her, but his eyes gradually showed concern. He didn't think this woman could actually contact the mayor. During the few minutes of waiting, the tension was suffocating. Angela stood still, her eyes never leaving Miller, while he began to sweat, his hand holding the gun shaking. A car horn sounded from afar, breaking the silence. A black car drove up, and a middle-aged man with an authoritative appearance stepped out of the car. It was the mayor of the city. "What is going on here?" the mayor asked, his voice deep but authoritative. Angela put down the phone and took a step forward. "Sir, I tried to explain the situation to Officer Miller, but he didn't believe me and pointed a gun at me." Miller tried to interject. "Mr. Mayor, she is trespassing on restricted grounds, and I am just doing my job." The mayor raised his hand to signal him and shouted, "Shut up, you idiot!" He turned to Angela, his eyes showing respect. "Colonel Carter, I apologize for the inconvenience. I will handle this personally." Angela nodded slightly, keeping her demeanor professional. She knew things were about to be resolved, but she couldn't forget the insult she had just experienced. Miller paled, realizing he had made a huge mistake, and was horrified when the mayor turned to him with a cold gaze. "Officer Miller, I want you to file a report immediately and hand over your weapon. I will suspend you until the investigation is complete." Angela stood there, speechless. She knew the officer would face serious consequences for his actions. But more than anything, she hoped that this would serve as a lesson to him and others like him about changing the way they view differences. The next day at the city sheriff's office, Miller was summoned to explain his actions. He entered tense, without any of his previous arrogance. An internal investigation team was waiting, including the mayor, the police chief, and a representative from the military, whom Angela had invited to ensure transparency. "Sir, I was just doing my job," Miller began, his voice shaking. "The area was marked off limits, and I didn't know who she was. If she was really a military officer, why wasn't she in uniform?" The mayor did not let him continue. "Miller, she did not need to wear a uniform to identify herself. She explained and asked you to verify her identity many times, but you refused. Instead, you used force and insulting words. Do you think that is how a law enforcement officer should act?" Miller didn't answer, his eyes downcast. A video from his body camera played, capturing the entire incident, from the way he yelled at Angela to the moment he pointed the gun at her. The sheriff shook his head in disappointment as the video ended. "Not only did you violate protocol, you also damaged the reputation of our police force," the chief said. "We cannot allow this behavior to continue within our ranks. A final decision will be made later, but suspension is certain." Meanwhile, Angela was invited to a press conference to share her views. Standing in front of dozens of cameras and flashbulbs, she wore a neat military uniform, symbolizing her pride and responsibility to her country. "I'm not here to attack Officer Miller personally," she began, her voice calm but powerful. "I'm here to address a larger issue: discrimination and prejudice. Actions like this not only affect me personally, but they also damage the relationship between law enforcement and the community. She stressed that her role was to oversee an important military exercise and that she had every right to be in the area. But instead of asking questions and verifying, I was treated as an intruder simply because my appearance did not fit the expectations of some people. Angela ended her speech with a call for change. We need education and training to eliminate bias. Every individual, regardless of skin color or profession, deserves to be treated with respect. A week later, the official results of the investigation were released. Miller was fired from the police force, citing abuse of power, violations of procedure, and discriminatory conduct. The decision was met with widespread community support, but also drew criticism from some of Miller's supporters. Angela did not feel happy about this decision. She understood that the problem was not just with Miller as an individual, but with a system that needed to be improved. The mayor also ordered mandatory training on how to handle situations, eliminate bias, and respect differences within the police force. Angela was invited to be a speaker at this training program, and she agreed in the hopes of creating real change. The case made headlines for weeks. Discussions about discrimination in law enforcement were sparked in the media and on social media. Angela became a symbol of courage and determination in fighting for justice and fairness. She received hundreds of letters of thanks and encouragement from people who had gone through similar situations. One young black mother wrote, "Because of you, I feel like my daughter will have a better future, where her worth is not determined by the color of her skin or her gender." Miller, after losing his job, was unable to find another job in law enforcement. But instead of feeling resentful, he began taking diversity and inclusion courses initiated by Angela. He gradually realized that his deep-seated biases had led him astray and resolved to change. Thank you for taking the time to follow the whole story. If you love this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. Once again, thank you for being with us. See you in the next stories.